Again, my name is Heather Arias, and I am the Freight Transport Branch Chief at Air Resources Board. And today what I want to spend a little bit of time talking to you about is California's Sustainable Freight Action Plan. Governor Brown issued an executive order in July of 2015 asking the state agencies that you see on the slide here to work together to come up with a plan that would improve freight efficiency, that would transition to zero-emission technologies, and would increase economic competitiveness. I am very proud to say that we were able to get that document published within a year, and it was posted in July of 2016. The document itself includes a vision for the future, guiding principles for how funding should be spent, a 2030 targets as requested in the executive order, a freight funding approach for how we might be able to help pay for some of these things, actions that the state agencies are going to take to help move the freight system forward, and some pilot projects, which I'll talk a little bit more about. So the freight transport system in our state has a lot of different modes and a lot of different facilities, as you can see here. Very complex system, a system that provides freight not only for our state, but for our country, for other countries. It's extremely important to our economy and to everything that the state is able to do successfully moving forward. On the flip side, from the air quality perspective, my agency in particular is very concerned about the emissions impacts. We've heard a lot about today greenhouse gases, but we are also very concerned about the particulate matter and the nitrous oxides. So in the past, we've looked at the whole modes, all the facilities, and we've tried to answer the question as to what is it that we need, what does the state need in order to be able to meet all of the air quality and GHG requirements. And we were able to answer pretty broadly by saying by 2050, what we need is all modes to be operating on zero-emission technologies everywhere feasible and near zero everywhere else. So zero-emission meaning electric and fuel cell across the board. Certainly that's not going to be the case when you're looking at things like ocean-going vessels. So there's going to be some work that we're going to have to do with our international partners to be able to even clean up those engines. But they will most likely continue to operate on the traditional combustion systems that they do now. As I mentioned, that the freight transport system is hugely important to our state's economy. A third of our jobs and the economy itself depends upon the freight transport system. Keeping that in mind, we were able to work with all of the different agencies to try and articulate what we think the freight system needs to be in the future. So when we're asking other policymakers to think about what actions they should be taking, we're asking them to look at this vision and see if their actions are helping to transform the system to meet this vision. As I mentioned, the governor asked us to put forward some targets. We worked with a lot of different stakeholders, some of which here at the table, in the room, and elsewhere, to be able to come up with 2 numerical targets and 1 qualitative target that is going to be transferred into a quantitative. So system efficiency target, we have put out the 25% efficiency, and this is from a 2014 baseline to 2030. So we're hoping to reach a 25% efficiency within that time frame. We're also hoping to deploy over 100,000 freight vehicles and equipment capable of zero-emission operation. So that's not your passenger cars, that's everything else. And maximize near zero-emission freight vehicles. And then last is the increased competitiveness and economic growth. We are working with some other partners with their research institutions to be able to further discuss this with our stakeholders. As you can imagine, the various ways in which to measure economic growth and how people define competitiveness varies broadly. So we needed more time to be able to come up with a quantitative target, but we hope to be able to do that within this next year. And then we have also committed to revisiting all 3 of these targets in 2019, because as we put out the numerical targets, folks are saying, well, we don't exactly know how that's going to play out. And we don't know whether we think those are the right numbers or whether you guys have the right metrics for measuring those. So we've committed to coming back in 2019 and taking another look at it, sharing the data that we have to show how we've made progress and potentially change the numbers if we need to. How are we going to pay for all of this? Some of you may be very familiar with TCIF. We also have the partnering program with that, which was the Goods Movement Emission Reduction Program. Those 2 programs were very successful in our state in being able to help provide for infrastructure funds as well as cleaner vehicles and equipment in the state to help move the freight. We have highlighted that as an example for our policymakers in the Capitol should they choose to help provide us with the next phase of those funds. Certainly, the state is also being is able to and is going to be getting the FAST Act funds as talked about a little bit earlier. And then last, we also committed to putting together a freight funding strategy that would articulate not only the state's public incentive dollar needs, but the private needs as well. We need to make sure that we are clear in what the true need is to be able to transition the system. There are 9 actions in the action plan. The first 2 talk about funding. The third one is some work that Caltrans is going to be doing to modernize many of their guidelines. Action 5 is about a think tank, which actually plays into a lot of what we've been talking about today. Our bosses, our chair, Marin, Commissioner Scott from CEC, the secretaries of the various agencies are all asking the question of everything is moving so quickly in the freight industry. What is it that's going to be happening 10 years from now? What's going to be happening 20 years from now? As policymakers, they're trying to make decisions now on things that they know are going to impact everybody 20, 30 years from now. Yet they know that the freight industry is changing so rapidly. 3 years ago, I didn't buy everything from Amazon for Christmas. This last year, I did. And I had a package showing up at my door every single day. That was just within 3 years. So they're struggling with this and are seeking input from folks to help them understand as they make policy decisions that impact you as well as the rest of the system. We're also going to be looking at the competitiveness, as I mentioned. We're going to be working at workforce development. We talked a little bit about that this morning with the change in technology that's going to shift opportunities for the workforce. And we need to make sure that our state is prepared and that the next generation of the workforce has jobs and they are just as successful and they can support the new technology and can provide for their families. And then 9 talks about regulatory permitting processes. This came up as well. We're talking about a process with one of the governor's offices that looks at permitting and regulations to see if there are opportunities for moving some of the larger projects forward that will help the freight system. Governor also asked us to put together pilot projects. Some folks like to think that these pilot projects will help showcase some very broad opportunities in the state, big kind of concepts. Other folks are looking at the pilot projects to be honest, to see if the state agencies can really work together and get something done. So we hope that it will do both. The first one is a dairy biomethane project in the valley, and we're looking at using a dairy cluster with the digesters to be able to provide fuel into the pipeline and hopefully eventually also fuel some of the trucks that service those dairies. There's going to be an advanced technology truck corridor in Southern California, working with LA Metro and some of the ideas that they have in order to be able to move freight more efficiently in Southern California. And the last is an advanced corridor at the border, so working with Sandag and others to see if there's opportunities for signage and for other IT solutions that will help move the freight across the border more quickly, and then maybe work towards things like a zero-emission truck lane so that trucks that are coming across the border with zero-emission trucks may get through faster. So obviously, some of the current efforts underway that we've been working on, I mentioned the think tank, I talked about competitiveness and workforce development. Caltrans has also convened an efficiency group with various experts, and they're continuing to work with that group. Some of the ITS type solutions that you guys are talking about today is being discussed in that group. Freight handbook, my agency is taking the lead on putting together a handbook for both organizations such as yours and others about siting and designs of freight facilities, so new freight facilities or changes to existing facilities. And then, of course, there's a lot of work that's happening in pushing new advanced technologies and new fueling for those technologies. Obviously, a lot of things that we're struggling with, that I think everybody's struggling with, is how's the freight going to be delivered in the future. We talked a little bit about autonomous vehicles today. You just saw the video on platooning. Data sharing, big data sharing, that's a huge issue. With all of these various technologies coming on board, that means there's a whole lot of data for us. And how are we all going to take that data and use it in a very responsible and productive way with our partners? Geofencing, you also saw that in one of the presentations. That's being applied across all the different modes. Drones, how are drones going to be used? I saw an article earlier today where UPS is actually testing drone delivery in Florida. So it's happening here in the US. And then Amazon is testing it over in Europe. And then, of course, there's also the conversations about 3D printing. Are we just going to be able to print what you want in your living room? So those answers, and then who knows what else is happening. I'm sure, and I've seen the presentation on this, so I won't spoil that. But there's lots of things that are being discussed. Things are happening overnight. How do we, at the state level, make sure that we can move forward in a very productive but fluid way to be able to support the freight transport industry and make sure that everybody gets the products that they want in a timely manner? So what are we doing right now? Mentioned a few things for you. There are some work groups going. We will be having workshops probably in the May timeframe throughout the state, and we are required to post work plans for the 3 pilot projects. So if you're interested in any one of those, we will have work plans posted at the website you see here in July. We are required to provide a progress report on the action plan next summer, July of 2018. And then, as I mentioned earlier, we're going to be revisiting the targets in July of 2019. And I think that's it.